Hello, welcome to Sustainable Leadership Live. I'm Lisa Danforth, your host, and today I have the fantastic Eric Leffler, who is a leadership design expert. I can't wait to hear what he has to say about the ways we lead and how it impacts ourselves, our teams, and our community. And I say, let's jump right in, Eric. We've got about 20 minutes, and I just want to share all of the brilliance. You and I have had many conversations, and there's so much fabulous stuff I want to share.
Yeah.
So where do we start with the ways that we lead?
I thought we were going to be talking about House of Dragon, and I've been binge watching that. But we can switch it up. We can talk about leadership.
There must be some leadership in the House of Dragon. We could totally take this and riff on it.
Too much. That's a whole other thing. But yeah, no, the ways that we lead, and just real quick, I'd love to. I know you know this, but I'd love to just share with your audience a little bit of how I got there, right? And I think that we all end up having this kind of tremendous leadership journey, whether or not you're a manager, a people manager, or like literally in a position of leadership. For me, it's always a question of just kind of how you start to show up for yourself, for others, and eventually your workplace community. And like I said, it was a journey that I've been on, and it's you kind of go through a lot of different evolutions. And I got to the point in my career as a media executive where I was so far removed from doing the things, right? And that happens to everyone. You are doing something that you love, you get really good at it. Somebody tells you, we're going to move you over here. And now you get to be in charge of other people doing it. And then you slowly stop doing that. And I was always still close to what I loved doing. And then my role transitioned into, spreadsheet hell. Let's just call it what it is. And I really struggled with what my purpose was, right? Because I was so far removed from that reason why I started doing what I was doing. And I had to decide what I was waking up for every day. And I'm the type of person, and it would drive my team crazy, that like, I just love Mondays, and I don't hide that fact. And I love Mondays because, and it's not like I'm thinking about the job the whole weekend and anything like that, but I just loved going to work every day, knowing that there were other challenges and other kind of mountains to climb and to conquer. And every week was different. So I just loved getting started with that. And I think that's a really kind of special experience.
How do you take that and inspire the people around you? Because a lot of people do sort of dread Mondays.
Yeah.
I think with all of the evolution that we've had over the last 2.5 years, more and more people are understanding we need that purpose and that mission, but Mondays still have that slight bit of dread to it. How can we bring more excitement to Mondays?
Yeah. That's a great question, and I appreciate it. And, I think that there is a degree of, and I don't have the cute media nugget, phrase to kind of wrap this, to wrap it all together. But I think about when I started working. My first job was, I was essentially it was in a transitionary stage as a tape runner at CNN, right? So you used to have to like go pull the tape, run it to the control room and all that. And they were transitioning everything into digital. I was always the first one into the office because I was just very anxious in my career and trying to people please and trying to live up to the expectations that I was setting for myself. And, all of those different things that, as we've discussed, they hit your body. They're triggers that stay with you for your entire career. And they start to manifest in all these other ways. But at the end of the day, I was able to go in, do my job. I had a work BlackBerry, but it was only for work, right? Dating myself a little bit here. But then I would go home at the end of the day and I would have a long day. It was like an 11-hour day, but then it was over. And I had like a real life with real people, not on social media. At that time, it was like MySpace or bust. And there was just a lot of separation. And I think the pandemic accelerated a lot of the remote hybrid work. There's not that, oh, I get to go have my life. There's a lot more of it all bleeding together. So it's hard to get excited for Mondays where you might have a manager that is sending
Yeah.
emails over the weekend that you
Mhm.
don't need to answer, but they're still popping up, and you have notifications on your phone and you're still seeing it, and you're jumping on Slack. And, like the Sunday scaries back when I was starting in my career was just a little feeling and maybe a little bit of dread, right? I gotta go to work tomorrow. I had such a great weekend. The Sunday scaries now turns into like, I'm going to just start working ahead because I
Mhm.
don't have the time to do my job during the week.
And does
And
this get, I'm just going to jump in, and does this get in the way? Are you finding this is what is stopping people from looking forward to Mondays? Is that it actually starts on Sundays?
I think it just never ends.
It just never
And
ends. Okay.
like, nobody likes, everyone's over all of these cliches, work-life balance and whatnot, right?
It's BS.
Um,
I'm
yeah.
telling you.
And that's why, and I'm going here, right? But that's where it comes into that self-regulation, that emotional regulation of how you're able to live your life and live your work life. And for me, there's a part of it where it blends together, right? So I remember, being on a shore, being in the Atlantic Ocean with my son one summer, and I was on vacation. But I know for me, it helps for me to be able to check in with work, answer a couple emails, and
Mhm.
to move on, because then I can go on and enjoy the rest of my day,
But
as
that's
opposed to pretending like it doesn't exist
right.
and then worrying about it all in the background.
But that's intentional, right? You are intentionally saying, I'm going to choose a few minutes, but you have, what I'm hearing is you have boundaries of, I'm going in, I've got 2 minutes, I've got 5 minutes, and then I'm getting back out. I'm not going to go down the rabbit hole for the next 2 hours. That's its intentionality, that self-regulation.
Yes, absolutely. Tons of boundaries. And I also, it's really living more presently, more purposely, and more intently. And I think that that's something that the workplace is really struggling with right now. I mean, you can look at any company's return to work hybrid policy, and just the struggle that everyone has to get it right. And I mean, I don't want to drop any hot takes on the return to work and working from home. Every industry is very different. Everyone has a different scenario. Child care, transportation, location, all of these things kind of factor into it. I just know for me personally, I enjoyed my commute. I enjoyed the
Right.
separation. I enjoyed that moment where I got to sit in my car for 10 minutes before I went back in and re-engaged with my family. So that all of those triggers that I was having from work, and all of that energy that was building up, was not getting transferred
Right.
to unwitting accomplices.
So it's really the transition, right? Having that transition of in separation. So
Yeah,
whether you're walking through the door to your den, which is now your office, and going out to your family, or that drive, we need to be more intentional to have that for sustainability for ourselves, for our community, for everyone.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think that you know, that's why when I'm working with companies or individuals and clients, I say like I'm helping them develop their leadership blueprint, right? Um,
Leadership, what was it?
Leadership blueprint,
Blueprint.
because it really is different for everyone, right?
Right.
It's you have to make it work for you. But it's important that we can, and that's the thing, is like we can have this dialogue right now about boundaries. We can have the dialogue about self-healing, right?
Mhm.
And like, so when I hear things about quiet quitting or the great resignation, and being a former member of the media, I understand what they're trying to do to, and I called it like it was a generational write-off of like kids these days, where it's not just kids, it's not just under 35. It's sometimes it's, and I was speaking to someone the other day, they're in their 60s, becoming a team manager for the first time in their last run. They're like, I got 5 more years of this. And they have the same thoughts as the 20 and the 30-year-olds that I speak with. And I was at an event the other night with Young Pueblo, and he actually referred to this as the healing generation, right?
Mm,
And I look at all of these kind of cultural shifts that we're seeing at the workplace as people taking an interest in themselves and setting those boundaries and doing the things that they need to do to design the life that they want. And that's why I always come back to, like, that's what leadership is, right? We think of leadership as something that you do to other people,
right.
unfortunately, right? And it's not. It starts with how you lead yourself. And you can't lead anyone else until you start to lead yourself.
So let's say we've got someone who is really, like you had said earlier, you were put into sort of a management position. You are good at this, you're brought up into the management. How do we start to learn how to lead ourselves and manage ourselves? Because like you've said, it starts with us. So we need to figure out how to lead ourselves before we can effectively and sustainably lead a team. Where can we start if we don't have the tools and we've kind of been thrown to the wolves?
Yeah. So I love that we can kind of openly talk about, like, and use phrases like trigger and
Mhm.
trauma, and it's accepted, right? And when I hear those terms, I hear individuals that are aware of their past, their present, how it's showing up in their present, and they start to have some idea of how they want to move forward. Um, when I'm talking with a lot of people, even the awareness of that sometimes still needs like a little step further. And there's tons of books, there's tons of people like me talking about these types of things, and yourself, right? And I'm such a granular learner that I'm like, no, 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 no. But, like, what are the steps, right? And inherently on any kind of journey, you need to determine those steps on your own, right? Part of the process is the journey. But I also think
Absolutely.
that there are some tangible steps that you can take to start to figure out ways to show up and lead yourself.
Great.
And the first thing that I recommend people do, right? And, like, I run workshops, I do one-on-one coachings around this, but these are secrets for everybody. Is you need to start to understand the relationship that you have with your emotional response to things and your body's physical reaction to it.
Mm.
So, like, and I just experienced, everyone always talks about the tightness in their throat, right? They feel their throat closing. And some of these can come from defensiveness, or want, right? Are two of my favorite kind of, like, triggers that I come back to. It's a, and by want, I mean the craving for or the aversion of, right?
Thank you for that
So,
clarification.
right,
Super
you get
helpful.
both sides of it. And shows up in many, many different ways at work. But when we come back to how we're feeling this in our body, we need to start writing that down. Just write it down. It's like having a dream journal. I think everyone did that when they were a teenager or something, maybe even still. But you start writing down every time you start to feel that kind of scraping under your skin. And I say, this is, everyone has something or someone that bothers them at work. It is normal. Every executive I've spoken
Right.
to, every PA, you don't even have to be at the job for more than a month before something is bothering you. And when you start to write that down, you immediately have to say, I'm feeling tightness in my shoulders, I'm getting
Mhm.
a headache, the throat, as I was talking about. And then immediately write down when you started feeling that. What experience were you in? What environments? What were all of the stimuli around you?
So good.
You start to see the patterns, right?
Mhm.
And then when you start to understand the patterns, you can kind of start working back a little bit to figure out what is the root of that, right? Because we all know the
Trigger.
definition of insanity is doing the same thing and expecting different results. And we're playing on that. We are absolutely using that to try to understand. It's not about living in your past. It's just not being kept prisoner by it.
Mhm.
My first job, I had and he will remain nameless. But it was like normal old school newsroom hazing stuff where
Mhm.
I would just get erasers flicked at my head and stuff like that. Horrible, horrible stuff. But the thing is, it didn't bother me like at all. I was
'Cause
just,
you could self-regulate.
but for someone else,
Yeah.
that could have been traumatizing. And I'm not talking about little t, I'm talking about big T trauma.
Mhm.
And that's the thing, is, like, all of these the different environments, the different ecosystems that we find ourselves in, consciously, subconsciously, by choice, not by choice. They impact everybody in different ways. And that's why the leadership blueprint is your own. And that's why, that's why I call myself a leadership design specialist, is because I just try to help people see the options that they have to develop what's going to work for them.
It's so easy, right, to keep our head down and not even look up to see that we have those different options. And I love what you were saying earlier, is that trigger piece. This is something I talk about often, is that when we can start noticing that trigger, we can prepare for it ahead of time, and you get to implement a new habit. Instead of the reaction that you've always had, we get to choose a different reaction. But understanding the trigger, I think, is at the fulcrum, that point where things can change.
Yeah. It's just about awareness, right? And I think it's also important, completely validating everything that you just said. This can all start to feel very, very overwhelming, especially if you're taking it very seriously, right? Because you're like, okay, well, I'm feeling like this, and this is a behavior that I need to change because I know it's not good. And it just gets away from you. We're simply just accepting that this is how you're feeling, right? And you've heard all of this stuff before, right? You are not your feelings, you are not your emotions, and just remembering that you are just a person existing in an environment can just help you remember to take a breath.
So that's what I was just going to interrupt you for a moment here, is, okay, we know this, right? We remember. What can we do when we are getting triggered and we know we should be behaving in a different way? Is it breath? What's a couple of different things that can anchor people back so that they can start to intentionally choose something different?
Yep. Breath work, mantras, and if you can, and if you need to, take a walk, right? Or set a boundary. There were times where I would see myself getting triggered, and I would just tell people, and people higher than me at the company, right? Because this is the thing, there's institutional patterns that happen at workplaces, and people are moving so quickly that it just gets to a point of berating, right? And you're
And it
like,
just becomes the way that it is. So it's the norm.
so it's setting that boundary. And I've said to people, I'm like, I'm feeling uncomfortable in this conversation right now. And, honestly, right away, they're like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean that. I just want to try to, right? And I'm just like, people just want to be seen, they want to be heard, and they want to be understood, right?
So true.
And that, it's like, when you get to that place of leadership where you understand that it's less about what you're saying and more about what's being heard, right? And that's about what you're hearing. And it's about taking a step back and giving people, one of my biggest red flags is when I hear people say, young leaders, right? Young managers, I just need them to do it this way. If they did it my way, everything would be perfect. And, sometimes these are people that, especially when it was on my team, that I've worked with them for a while right now. And I'm like, I don't know if your way is necessarily the way. I'm like, and it's about opening up the door, right? It's about more true inclusion at the workplace, right? I always say it's safety of emotional and intellectual spaces. And you want people to, you as a leader need to understand that you're not always going to have the right answer, right? And that there isn't one right way to do things. There's a lot of right ways to do things. And being able to, again, take that step back to create some space, you realize all you need to do is that one thing. And as long as everyone's aligned with what that main goal is,
Right. Is so key.
it's
What I'm really hearing you say, Eric, because we are at time, believe it or not, but what I'm really that the ways that we lead come down to, it starts with internal leadership, the way that we lead ourselves, that self-regulation, understanding our triggers that can have us reacting in a way that isn't helpful, and choosing something different, understand that we have that ability to, like what you were just saying, is just sort of take a pause, take a moment to choose differently. So the ways that we lead are within us. It's just not always easy to access.
Yep. And I like to say that this is not about putting band-aids on things, right? It's not about working with the employees that just don't get it, right?
Mhm.
No band-aids, only breakthroughs, right? And if there's one piece of advice to anybody that's listening, on like, okay, like I'm feeling all these things at work and I don't know what to do, just remember to breathe. I think when you start to become a little bit more aware of when you're not breathing and you're like, wait, how am I still alive?
Right.
You're just holding your breath, waiting for the next shoe to drop. And when we come back to sustainable workplaces, the fight that I'm in right now, and I know the fight that you're in right now, is about creating more awareness around ways that we can create more sustainable workplaces. This happens to be my niche and my area, and it's just a message that I love talking about and I love sharing. So I just wanted to thank you so much for giving me the platform to be able to share a little bit of this.
Well, thank you for sharing your brilliance. I knew that you would bring it. And I love what you just said. No band-aids,
Only breakthroughs.
only breakthroughs. Starts with the breath, right?
Yep.
Just breathe, breathe. This has been awesome, Eric. Thank you so much. Actually, I have a question for you before we lead into where people can reach out. What's one habit or
What about House of
boundary?
Dragon?
Pardon me?
It's not about House of Dragon. We're still
No, it's
talking
not.
about
I
leadership.
have never heard of House of Dragon, to be totally honest with you. I might be aged out of that one. I'm not sure. But what one habit or boundary has helped you live and lead a more sustainable life?
Yep. Habits are very, very important in my
Mhm.
life. But I want to share a boundary. Maybe that's a different episode. My habits. The boundary is simply understanding that it's okay to say no.
Yes.
You have to understand what you can give. A lot of times we give so much more to other people than we're actually giving to ourselves. And no is a really nice boundary to remember that you have to take care of yourself first.
Starts within, like you said, right at the very beginning. So this is awesome. Thank you, Eric. Where can people find you, reach out to you? Is there a social platform that you prefer to connect with?
Yep. I'm on all the platforms. The website is ericleffler.com. You can just hear a lot more about this. Very passionate, and I spend a lot of time crafting through writing on my newsletter, which is Authentically Leading. You can find that at ericleffler.substack.com. And just drop me a note. It's eric@ericleffler.com. I just love having these conversations, and I'm trying to help however I can.
Yeah, he does. He's great to talk with. So absolutely reach out, check out his website, check out his blog. Absolute phenomenal work. And next week, I have the wonderful Julie Goodall from Genesis Consulting on October 19th. She is talking about just because we're in business for ourselves does not mean that we have to do everything for ourselves, by ourselves. So join us. She is called the Chaos Coordinator. You won't want to miss what she has to share. She is brilliant at her work. So again, October 19th, Julie Goodall from Genesis Consulting. And I will see everyone next week. Eric, thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
All right. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.